All right, so welcome to all of you guys who are joining us for our first online class. We're going to start with a little bit of background about me, and you can follow along with the slides that will be provided online as well. So I got into natural building right around 2010. Before then, I was in the mortgage industry working for Wells Fargo and getting a lot of understanding and education about the real estate world, and really that led me to kind of wanting to know more. So then, being a mortgage broker, I went into underwriting, and then I went into processing, and I really dove deep into understanding how the banks work and how they approve loans. And then with all that information, I took that and turned it into a real estate investment company, and we ended up building and renovating a bunch of old Portland homes. And our niche was basically try to get houses that were in from the early 1900s and remodel them to period and then get them back on the market. And this was right around 2005. And I did this for a couple years. 2006 actually, and I did it for a couple years. And then after that, the market crashed. We were left holding a bunch of debt. We were trying to sell these homes that were really beautifully done, but unfortunately the market came down so much that they weren't worth what we owed. So we had to let everything go, and we had to start all over again. And part of that starting over process, there's two amazing things that happened from it. One was that we had to sit back and think about what we want our lives to be. And coming from the mortgage world and the banking world, thinking that money was everything, and that when we made enough money, we would be able to retire to be happy, and that wasn't really the case. So we looked at this opportunity as a way to start over and a way to kind of find our path and what we want to do and our passion. Part of that period where we were looking to what our passion and what we were wanting to do was that I had all this knowledge and information about mortgages, and I understood how the process worked, and I speak Spanish fluently, so I was able to help the clients that I actually helped get into those mortgages. They were contacting me, and so what I did is I started a nonprofit. It was called Amigos de Casas, which is Friends of Homes, and I helped the Hispanic community out of foreclosure. So we would work with banks. We would help them rework their mortgages so they would have lower payments. Sometimes we would, increase the loan period so that they would reduce their payments as well. And then we were able to kind of help many homes be saved. So that was kind of the process. But one thing that I learned from that was that really it was just a Band-Aid, because ultimately they had to start over, bring people into the home, get second job. They were working 5 to 6 days a week and basically only enjoying the home for about a day, and then having to do the grind all over again. So even though I felt great by helping them and they really appreciated everything that we did, I still felt that I wasn't really doing my passion. I wasn't really following what I felt was my passion or my dream. So my wife, let's go to the next slide here, basically found this book that is called the Hand Sculpted House book. And we read that book. The author is actually from Oregon. He's actually from Wales, but he was living in Oregon, in Coquille, Oregon, which is about almost 2 hours away from Portland. We called him to see if we could come visit, and he answered the phone. His name is Yanto Evans. He's the gentleman there on the picture. And we had a great conversation. He invited us over for a 3-day weekend to do kind of like a introduction to natural building and to see some of the beautiful natural buildings. So we packed up our stuff. I took a 3-day weekend, headed down to Coquille, Oregon, to Cobb Cottage, is the company that he started. And as you're walking up the path, you see this sign that says there are 2 ways to get rich. You can make more money, or you could require less. And that really hit home for me, because at the time, coming from this mindset that money was everything, it made me really kind of dig deep and say, is that really everything? Is that a way to get rich, is to accumulate more? And so the concept of requiring less was something I really wanted to ponder. And then as you walk up the path, you come into the Myrtle, which is that picture on the right hand corner, and it's this beautiful structure that's got green living roof, curvy entranceways, curvy windows, and it's just gorgeous. And as you know, we were coming in at night and it was dark. You can see the window lit with people inside and laughing and smiling, and we walk in and there's Yanto just basically looking like a hobbit inside of a hobbit home. And we were blown away by just coming into this structure and seeing the roof lines. The picture on the bottom right corner there is the Myrtle inside, and it's his library. And it's got, beautiful round timbers, a big giant window that overlooks the south side, earthen plasters. That bench that they're sitting on there is actually a cob bench that is with a rocket stove, so it's heated, so it's nice and warm. And this was probably, late winter, early spring where we came. So everything was cold and green and lush, and it was really beautiful and really just made me understand the beauty of natural building. So that weekend, I had a chance to speak with him, kind of get an understanding. I didn't even know this was a possibility or this was real. So it was a really shift in my reality. And that really led me to kind of want to know more. So let's go on to the next slide here. So what made me realize that I wanted to make natural building a career? Well, after that weekend, I did lots of praying, lots of meditating. Part of the process of losing all your money is you kind of look for God at the same time, because you try to find your connection to the universe, to the earth, to everything, and God is a great connector. So with those praying and the meditating, I was able to find my guru, which is Paramahansa Yogananda, and as well as having a window, an opportunity to use spirituality to find my path, which is really amazing. So after many weeks of meditating, Linda, Yanto's partner, contacted me, and she was really impressed with our meeting that weekend, and she knew that I was in construction, and she offered me a full ride apprenticeship. Normally it's a $3,000 apprenticeship program for 3 months. And she wanted us to come down and live there, and they were going to provide with food, and we would just, in exchange, be able to do natural building. So obviously running a nonprofit, that was me being the only person doing all the work. I had my brother who was helping me, and I had an assistant, but that was pretty much the people that were there full time. And I was really the only one who knew how to work with the banks. My brother was mostly doing the paperwork and connecting, finding more people to help. He would drive around, put flyers in people's houses that we knew that were in foreclosure in the Hispanic community. So I realized I needed to shut down the nonprofit to do this apprenticeship. So I slowly started shutting down the nonprofit. I called the community there for unemployment for my brother so he can collect unemployment. The lady I talked to said that I should go ahead and qualify, because I guess people from unemployment for nonprofits can also qualify, which I didn't really know that at the time. So I did that, and then as I continued to help people, the summer was coming near, and we were trying to save money. But when you work for a nonprofit or you help people, we weren't collecting any money from any grants or anything. Everything that came in through the door was through donations of the same people we were helping. So as we didn't turn anyone down, but we asked them if they could donate towards the cause, and most people were gladly to do it, and it was very affordable. It's $250. So we were able to help them quite a bit, and they were able to help us live and sustain, but it wasn't like we were having a lot of money. So we were conflicted. The nonprofit was almost shutting down. We were basically wrapping down. The money was getting low, and we had no idea how we were going to live and how we were going to do the apprenticeship program. And again, just offering everything up to God and meditating on it, and just surrendering to the reality, if this is something that's meant to happen, it will happen, and really having faith. I get a letter from the unemployment office, and it was saying that we got unemployment, and it started the same day as my apprenticeship program, and it was for the exact same dollars, up to the penny, for what we needed. It was $205, which is the random amount per week, which was the bare minimum that we needed at the time without having to pay rent, to just be able to pay our cell phone, our insurance, and gas. and then we were going to use food stamps to try to get food. And since we were going to be provided with food there at Cobb Cottage, it wasn't really going to need to be a lot, so it was just enough to get us by. So that was the first miracle that I realized, okay, the windows, the doors are opening. This is a path that I want to follow. So I called Linda back and I said, okay, let's do it. It worked out. I was still helping people. So it was a little bit stressful because I was trying to do the apprenticeship program and help people. So there was times where I had to leave the program to just kind of finish up what I was doing because I didn't want to leave anyone hanging. But overall, that was, the main reason, as you can see in the slide here, there's the left top corner is also the myrtle. It's an eating area, which is beautiful, curvy walls. The gate next to that is a gate that goes into the garden. The next little building is actually the first building that I did on our own. The next picture there is Oliver, which is my oldest son, going through the garden, another garden gate. The bottom left picture is Linda's house that we helped to do all the spindles, and we helped do the plastering and the sanding and the staining of the cabinets. The next picture there is a living roof, which is an amazing. It's the exact same structure as the right corner picture. So you can see it's like the one's the front and one's the top view, and it was just amazing to me to see how water moved from that roof. It was really great. And then the other picture in between those two are Linda's house. So that's the same picture as the kitchen there. So really, what made me realize that I wanted to make natural building a career was how beautiful the buildings are, the feeling that you get being inside of these buildings, and then this calling that had never felt before about being able to teach people. Coming from the nonprofit, I felt like it was a Band-Aid, but if I can teach people to build their own home with the money that they have, then they don't have to go into debt. They can just build and live in the home that they create. As well as natural building, it's not just a way of building, it's really a way of life. So that's how I got there. We'll go on to the next slide. My favorite parts of natural building, I really love plastering and finishes. So you can see here in these pictures, you can do a lot of beautiful things with it. You can do designs, you can do reliefs, which is basically plaster that kind of comes out. You can do like Tadillac, the right corner window, top right is walls that are Tadillac, which repels water. It's a Moroccan style, which we'll talk later down when we get into plasters. You can do lime plasters. That bottom left corner is a picture of the lime plastering that we did. And I also really loved the wood that comes into the work, the natural round woods and the plasters along with the wood. And then the bottom right corner is the exterior lime plaster with the pigment that we did. And so not only, as you can see from these pictures, not only is it beautiful to have these natural finishes, but these natural finishes are also really environmentally friendly. They're really great for the people living in the home, and they have a feel to it that drywall doesn't. And that it's funny because once you start doing natural plasters and you start looking at walls, you start to see, they're actually trying to make it look natural, and it just doesn't. But the techniques that they use, and mainly the reason they do this is because it's something that we've lived in for thousands of years. We've lived in homes that are earthly built and that have natural finishes. And so in our DNA, it's deep inside of us that this is what feels good and this is what feels right. So conventional world is tapping into that feeling. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Building with natural materials. So a lot of questions that I get is what is natural building? And you'll get this too. So it's important for all of you who are interested in doing natural building to kind of get a repertoire of what you're going to say. So to me, what I usually say is natural building is building with natural materials like stone, clay, sand, straw, wood, and water. So those are the main aspects of it. And if the goal really is that if you can build a home or a structure with 80% of these materials, you're only having to use 20% that are manufactured or that are not natural or that are not produced locally. Obviously, Yonto Evans, who is the founder of Cobb Cottage and we call the godfather of Cobb, he is a purist. And so he really believes that, and rightly so, that we can actually build our homes with what we have there. which is absolutely true. And everyone that can do that should do that. But we are trying to tap into the mainstream world. We are trying to help people understand that you can live in a natural building in downtown San Francisco, that you can be in a beautiful, sustainable home in downtown LA. So to be able to play this game, to be able to kind of infiltrate the conventional building systems and industry, we have to kind of play by their rules, but at the same time we're also playing by our rules, staying as natural as we can, having materials that are local, and be able to make these homes sustainably and also healthy for the people living in them. And we feel like we're doing a pretty good job. We're getting a lot of clients that are interested, and we're getting lots of students to come through. And ideally, these students will go off and build their own homes for their own clients, and will change the industry slowly and ideally relatively fast. All right, so moving on. Why would people choose natural building over conventional building? It's basically because, for one, is they understand that it exists. There's a lot of people who don't even know that natural building exists. And two is, if you have the materials readily available, then that is a really good option for you. A lot of people consider, or they have this illusion that natural building is really cheap and affordable, which it is if you build it yourself. Like, there's no doubt. If you're not having to pay anybody else, you're not having to pay me or any of my workers to build a home for you, then it is very affordable. And you can take as long as you want to do it. But as soon as if your time is best spent being a doctor, or, working at a job that you feel passionate about, then it's also a great energy exchange to be able to afford to pay us to follow our passion. And so in return, you're taking your passion to pay for our passion, and in return, you get a beautiful, natural, sustainable home. So it really is up to you how you want to use these materials that are readily available to you. If you want to do it yourself, or if you want to use them to build a home using professionals or other people or other natural builders. Either way, community is important, because most of our buildings are built with community. So that's another added benefit of building with sustainable materials found from the land. And the other important part is that they're not toxic. So not too many people have gotten clay poisoning. So, all right, so we'll move on. The next material is stone. It's also another material that's readily available. You can harvest it from the land or nearby. Use it to face concrete foundations, because in California we have to build with a stem wall or a slab for earthquake purposes, and so unless you have a master stone mason who knows how to do it also to code and can pass the seismic tests the engineers will put on it, then most cases people will just use concrete, and then they'll face their concrete with beautiful stone so that it hides, the concrete, and it provides another different look and beautiful look to it. We usually also use it under straw bale walls. So if we have a stem wall, and we have a stone face, we'll actually split the stone face and the stem wall and have a cob go over both of them, and you build our walls directly over that. Obviously they're strong, and they're durable, and they're abundant, and stone's really beautiful, especially if you have someone that knows what they're doing. All right, next is clay. In our area where we live in Northern California, there's an abundance of clay, so that is something that is really available to us. So we can locally source it, and ideally it comes directly from underneath the foundation, and then we're able to put it right back into the building. We use it on the walls. Clay is also healing and non-toxic and very versatile. I don't know if you've ever had a clay mask put on your face, but the main reason they do that is because it pulls all those toxins out of your skin into the clay. So at home it does the exact same thing. If you have clay plasters on your wall, it's actually literally pulling toxins out of your home into the wall and then out into the world. So it's a very amazing feeling that after you sleep in a home that's made with clay. So again, we use it for plastering, we use it for flooring, for earthen floors, for sculpting and details. It's just an amazing product, and once it dries, people are always blown away of how hard it dries. They're always like, wow, this is just as hard as concrete, which it is. I mean, it definitely has a very, especially if you use sand in it. If it's straight clay, you hit it, it'll turn into powder again. But if you added sand to it and you add straw to it and you add clay, it becomes this really monolithic product that is very versatile and that is very durable and very strong. But it's also very susceptible to water. So that's why when we do our natural buildings, we'll talk more about that later in other classes, but our buildings have very big eaves to protect it. So Yanta calls it a big hat, and then the stone foundation is about 18 inches up, stone face, and it's a boots. So it's a big hat and big boots for our natural buildings. Okay, moving on, we'll do sand. So again, depending on where you live, but sand is also in our area very abundant. We live by a bunch of rivers, and so you want to try to use river sand. You don't really want to use ocean sand because ocean sand is rounded and river sand is jagged. So you want to use jagged sand when you're building with natural materials and clay. It's also locally sourced, so you use it to make cob, use it to strengthen plasters, and then also use it for flooring and then mixing oven mixes. So sand is a really important part of natural building because it is what we call the compression strength. So the clay is the glue and the sand is the compression strength. So when the clay starts to dry, it wants to move, and so when it wants to move, it wants to press or pull apart. So when it wants to press, when it wants to compress, when it's dry and it's getting smaller, the sand actually is the compression strength, keeps it apart from the clay. Otherwise the clay would just start kind of getting more brittle and dusty. So the sand is a very important part. The next important part in natural building obviously is the straw. It's also locally sourced. You can use wheat straw, you can use rice straw. Really, you can use any straw that you have available in your area as long as it's not living. In other words, it's a byproduct. So the aspects of the straw that you want are the stems, the areas. So you don't want the wheat, you don't want the greenery, you don't want the stuff. You want it to be that's stuff that's basically thrown away in most cases. So for us, it's a great byproduct of the area where we live. There's a lot of rice straw in the valley. It's less than 50 miles away from us, and so we're able to utilize the straw from the valley to get it, and we use rice straw, but maybe where you live, wheat straw might be closer. The R value or the insulation value of straw is typically, depending on how you lay your bales, if you're laying them flat, it's somewhere around 50 R value, 48 to 50. If you lay them on end, which is like the skinnier part, it's about 16 inches, it's somewhere around R25. And we'll get really detailed into the straw bale building and all the R values and what all that means later in later classes. But just so you know, it's the insulation value is R, which is what it means. Vapor permeable. So the straw bales are able to absorb moisture and able to transmute it through the bale and out the wall. So basically straw bales are like breathing living organism that allow condensation and moisture to penetrate, but then it always pulls it out and away from wherever the heat is. So if your heat is inside or your heat is outside, it allows that moisture to be able to move in and out. So there's not really any chance of mold. A lot of people always ask me, well, isn't it going to get moldy when it gets wet? And the answer is no, it's not. If you built your home with clay plasters on the inside and lime plasters on the outside, both of those plasters want to absorb moisture. They are thirsty. So any moisture that gets in the straw bales are naturally being able to be pulled to one direction or the other direction, allowing them to breathe. So people say breathing homes, but really what it is it's air penetrating through, it's just that moisture is able to move through them. So that creates a very healthy home as well. They're easy to install and fast to stack. We can usually stack a whole entire house or a wall, depending on the size of the house, in about a day with enough help. And the other benefit obviously is that it's a byproduct. So it's something that normally isn't being used, or it gets thrown away, or gets used in stalls or landscaping, but it's not usually used for building, except for in California. And now it's getting to be a lot more popular, which is really amazing. Next one is wood. So obviously in our area, we lived in a high dense forest area. I mean, you may not be in that same situation, but ideally there will be a forest near you where that you can source and find local wood. So typically for our projects, we try to find the wood on the land or nearby. We use round wood if the client would like to have that look. We see this here in this picture. You can see how beautiful these are oak. And they've been sitting out in nature for about 2 years drying, so it was perfect opportunity for us to use, and it was going to be something that was going to get thrown away, so we were able to save them as well. Or you can locally have it milled. So in our area we have portable mills, people who come out and they'll mill your lumber from your land, and they'll either do a per board foot cost or they'll do a trade. Well, they'll take half and they'll leave you half, so just really depending on the sawyer. So, and it's very structural. So in our area, you could do load bearing straw bales, but it's very complicated, and there's a lot of details that have to go into it. But so because we have so much wood available to us at a reasonable price, we're able to use it for structural components. So the compression strength of wood, the lateral movement of wood, all that stuff is very easily calculated by engineers, and it's something that they just understand. So when we are trying to pass our natural buildings to code, the engineers have no problem being able to calculate our structural load, our snow load, and our lateral load. So we are able to submit to county, and the county understands what we're doing, and it's very simple, and they don't even think twice about our buildings. They just pass them. Post and beam is the other option, so you can use it either squared or round wood, but it's a lot less wood because now you're framing up to 8 feet apart, or in some cases you can do more depending on the size of your lumber and how it's engineered. So it's just because we are using wood the way conventional builders do it, it doesn't necessarily mean we're either using more or less. It just basically means that we are sourcing our materials. The people that are sourcing the lumber for us, the millers, the sawyers, they are using practices to sustain the old growth and take away the new growth. And then what happens when you take away the new growth? Well, that gives more room for the forest to grow and to thrive. The new growth also is less dense, and it's also not as wide. So that's the perfect lumber for us. It's not great for conventional mills. They want the big trees so they can get the more lumber out of it. But for us, the little round, 6 to 12 inch posts are great for a small structure. So for us, it's a really great opportunity to take care of the forest, to manage it properly, and to be able to use the lumber into our homes. All right, and the last material is water. Obviously, depending on where you live, but we have water here, so it's locally sourced. Most homes here are on wells. If they're in the city, they're from the reservoir or the lakes or the rivers. It's used to hydrate clay, so it makes clay malleable, and you can mold it to whatever you want. It's also, we use it to test the drainage under the foundation, so we'll get into that at a later class, but water is very useful for us to tell how everything is sloping, so that when we build our structures, we make sure that water can come in and water can go out, because water is one of the most dangerous part to our natural buildings, and so we want to make sure that we work with it, not against it. We use it to stay cool in the sun, so as we're building, obviously we water ourselves, we water the materials we're working with, but also there's lots of different designs that you can do to utilize water to cool. Radiant floor heating is a system that uses water to heat the home. You could also use it to cool the home. You have also same radiant floor heating system that you can do in walls, where the water running through inside the tubes inside the wall can heat the home as well as cool the home. So water can be very useful in many ways. Swamp coolers, it's a great example of how just water coming out of the earth, blowing through a fan, keeps a room cool. So water is an amazing tool for our building. Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to put it all together. So basically, design your structure with the end in mind. Just basically think about what your structure is going to be, and natural building is really important. Use materials that are available to you. Then you can budget accordingly, and then obviously consult with an engineer, an architect, or a natural builder that has done that, so you can kind of start moving forward with your information. Then we're going to get into a little bit of why would people choose natural building over green building. So again, local materials, less impact on the environment. Green products are still manufactured right now. Some are manufactured in China or other countries, and they have a large environmental footprint. Green products are not also void of toxics or glues. So it's important to, whenever you're buying a green product, to kind of look at the ingredient, see what's inside of them, and make a decision. Is that something that's going to harm your family in the long run? Is it going to off-gas? So lots of information there. And the green industry is growing tremendously, and it's great that it's growing because they do share a lot of our values. But it's also your right and to do your due diligence to figure out what materials you can use, because technically speaking, natural building is a green building. So let's move on to the next slide here. I won't read through all this, but you can kind of look at it on your own time. But the most important part that I want to highlight, so the major differences between natural building and green building is that a lot of the green building materials are manufactured. So you can, like, sift panels is one of the concepts that the people use. Insulative foundation blocks is the other one that a lot of green buildings use. They use styrofoam. And there's also blocks. There's hempcrete blocks. There's concrete blocks with wood chips. That's a green product. So all these are manufactured products, which is great because they obviously create work. They're taking a waste product and turning it into a building product. There's absolutely the whole philosophy of green building is in alignment with what we are doing. But to get to the point of what the difference is that we are actually taking material from the land, putting it back into the building without, there's no middleman, there's no center step of manufacturing. You could take the straw bale from the farmer, bring it to your land, and build the walls with it. You can take the clay from your foundation that you dug up and put it back on top of that straw bale wall with it. You can get sand from the quarry, bring it down, mix it with your clay, and there's your plasters. We are not having to get anything shipped from any other countries or having anything manufactured except for that 20% window that we talked about. So if 80% of our materials are natural, again, the wood is local, getting milled. It's not coming from Canada or Oregon or the East Coast. So we're avoiding to have to pay the shipping, the trucking, the cost to run those big mills. We're supporting our local sawyer, local mill, and we're able to use that material that actually comes from that area. So that wood is really perfect for that area because that's where it grew. So that's the major differences. All right, so we'll go on to, so we covered step one, which is understanding. So how can people use natural materials to build to code? So one is understanding what the materials are and understanding what they do. Step two is basically the design and the budget. So we'll move on to that now. The design of it basically is you kind of design your home to fit your life and your needs. So a big difference in natural building, conventional building, is we don't really build for the future in terms of, we're going to have 6 kids, so we need a 2,400 square foot house now when there's just 2 of us. Really the idea in your design is, okay, well, it's just 2 of us. Let's start with a 500 square foot, but let's add doors that we can grow to. Let's make sure that our ceilings are going to be, or our roofs are going to be able to be attached to without having to take away a roof or do too much damage. So it's really mindful design. It's just taking the concept of what your end goal is, again, keeping the end goal in mind, but bringing it back down to what can I afford right now and what do I need right now, and staying to the basics. Starting with a budget. So our buildings, especially nowadays, since prices are going up, go from somewhere around $232 a square foot to $350 is kind of medium range for finishes, and as high as $400 or even higher, really, depending on how fancy you want to get with your finishes. 400 square foot for finish. Again, this is California prices, so if you're outside of California, you'll have to figure that out. Build in phases. So again, like we talked about, if you're going to start with just 2 people, you start with your center project, your open kitchen layout, your dining room, maybe a loft for a sleeping area that eventually could be a guest loft, and then you have a bathroom. And then, let's say the next year you build your master bedroom, and then you have your own bath, your own shower, your own room space, and then now you have a kid. And then obviously in our family, our kids stay with us, so they're in their room. But when they get older and they're ready to have their own space, then that other addition gets added on to the other side, where now they have their own master bedroom, their own room. And you can kind of design your home for it to grow. And you can have an office in the back, or maybe a art studio or wood shop. Again, just designing your home in phases so that you can kind of get to the point where you want to get with your end goal in mind. Ideally, you would use a professional designer, an engineer, a contractor, someone that can help you make things move smoothly. Especially if you're not done any building yourself, you can use natural materials that are non-toxic to help keep everything healthy, which as we talked about before. If you're planning to finance your building, which is something we'll get into later in another class, you'll be required to use a professional throughout the building process. So if you are going to get bank financing, and there is a bank that's going to let you do a natural building, then they are requiring for it to be engineered. They're requiring it to be built by a contractor, licensed contractor, and they want to make sure everything is done to code and it's done legitimate through the county. All right, moving on. Step 3, the building phases. So you can kind of read through these on your own. I'll just kind of go over them pretty quickly here. First phase obviously is the foundation. So again, it's not very natural, but because we're building to code in California, they require us to do a concrete stem wall as a monolithic system. So in case there's an earthquake, everything shakes and moves together, or a slab. So concrete stem walls, slabs are all required to code. Designed to take the load in the timber framing. That's what they're mostly done. It's engineered to take the snow load, seismic pressure, wind, and wind shear. And unfortunately, it's not very natural, but very important part of building process. Again, it's something we can do with community. Framing with timbers. The post and beam structure that we talked about earlier can go up fast and are easy to design, and they can pass the code. So that's another added benefit of using timbers. The beams can be kept round or milled to desired shape. In most cases, post and beams are from the land or nearby. The finishes look gives the home a feeling of living amongst the trees, which is really beautiful, as you saw in some of those pictures I sent. Obviously, it's beautiful and sustainable. So framing is great if you can do it. Wall systems. So cob walls basically is clay, sand, and water. It's a high thermal mass, also referred to as rammed earth with reinforced fiber. So in our area, how we passed the code, because people considered the word cob taboo, we actually found that there is a code in California for rammed earth. So we just called, and it's basically rammed earth is clay with cement and some kind of rebar. And so we call ours rammed earth, natural rammed earth with reinforced fiber, and the reinforced fiber is the straw. So that we just kind of took the same concept that they understood, and we changed the name, and now we can build with cob. Bale cob, which is basically a combination of straw bale with cob, is a high thermal value. Is very vapor permeable. Bale cob was actually founded and kind of invented by Yanto Evans, and it's something that he promoted a lot when I was there, and I fell in love with it because it was a great way to build. And it's basically just taking the straw bales, integrating cob with it, and then putting cob layers on the outside, and then as the cob dries, the clay shrinks and it naturally compresses the bale. So you don't have to have any straps, you don't have to have any compression ties, you don't have to have any of that stuff because the clay does all the compression. And then you do a cob bond beam up top that also presses down as part of the compression, as you can see in these pictures here. Light clay, it's basically loose straw, lightly covered with clay, packed tightly between forms. It's used mostly for interior walls, but you can use them for exterior walls. Heavy clay, which is loose straw with heavily covered with wet clay, also used to level out the straw bale walls and used for interior and exterior walls. All right, moving on. We have roofing. So roofing, again, here's an example of a reciprocal roof that we did in that round building. Roofing, obviously we have rafters, which is basically the beams that hold up your roof. It can be round or dimensional lumber depending on your design. It can be designed to support high insulative value, so depending on how much depth you give yourself on those beams, you can pack that with insulation. You can use metal for the exterior, you can use composite, you can use living roof, anything that's really available to you affordably, or if it's a look that you're trying to go for. We personally love living roofs, so that's kind of like one of the things that we try to promote as much as we can, but we also know it's not always affordable for everyone. A hip roof, gable roof, shed roof, and other roof styles can be incorporated with natural building. So there's not really any kind of roof that we can't do in natural building. It just really depends on the design and the process. So if you have an idea of a roof style that you like and then you want to design your home around that style, it's definitely doable. We do the opposite. We design our homes first and then we figure out how the roof can lay out. All right, moving on. Natural plasters. So we use clay, lime, gypsum. Tadalac is basically a lime plaster. Venetian plaster is also another form of lime. It can be smooth, polished, textured. It can be finished flat or curvy, depending on what you like. Natural plasters are all sustainable, vapor permeable, and they're very beautiful. Plasters can be colored with pigments, or they can be painted with mineral paints or natural paints. All right, we're moving on. So your finishes. So here we go into more details. So cabinet, countertops, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, flooring, built-ins are all easy to incorporate into a natural building as long as we have the idea of what you want ahead of time, not trying to do it backwards when we're almost done and you're like, actually, can I have a built-in here? So it's ideally when you're in the design process that we will help you with that, or you should figure that out yourself before you start getting to your finishes. The more custom the shape of the room, the more custom the finishes will need to be. If you're trying to put a square bed in a round bedroom, it's a little bit challenging. So you want to make sure. Same thing with a couch. You want to put a couch in a round room, you're going to have some dead space. So you have to take that into consideration. Smart design. So with the end in mind, allow finishes to be incorporated easily to lower the cost of custom finishes. So again, just keeping in mind what you want it to look like at the end will allow you to keep your costs down and your time down instead of having to figure out how to make something happen in an odd shaped room. Overall finishes overall the finishes can add up quickly, so it's important to choose wisely and keep things simple. In most cases, depending on your budget, if you're trying to do a design, the less sometimes is more. So it's just important not to get too carried away. I know especially on Instagram, if you see all these beautiful natural built-ins and you start to do this and then I'm like, oh, and then I need another one here and then I need another one there, then it could add up pretty quickly because all those built-ins when you're plastering take a lot of time. All right, moving on. So cost difference between natural building, green building, and conventional building. Custom green buildings sometimes can go somewhere around $500 per square foot, depending on the area. This information has come from a friend that does green building in our area, so this is more particular to Northern California. Custom conventional built homes are somewhere around $350 per square foot. So it's a little bit, the guy that I asked, he's an amazing builder and he builds very extremely efficiently, so his costs are very low. So that's his cost. In some cases, he said other builders can go up to $400 for custom Tahoe homes. So it just depends on the design. For us, for custom natural building homes, it's somewhere around $400 a square foot is kind of what we're averaging. And so it is definitely higher than conventional building, especially for professional builders in comparison to professional builders that have been doing this for many years, who have a system down and can get their costs down. But we're still less in green building because, again, like we talked about earlier, a lot of our materials doesn't have to be manufactured, doesn't have to be built. And because green is amazing in terms of what they're trying to do and trying to keep the glues that are natural, they're not off-gassing, they're trying really hard to try to minimize the amount of toxicity that is leaved into the environment and also into your home. They do have to pay for that because that is a cost. It's not a product that is available around the world. So it's something that has to be manufactured, has to be created, has to be put together. So a lot of the engineered lumber that they use to minimize the lumber that you need for your home, which is a great concept, it's all glued. It's all has to be manufactured and engineered. So you're paying for that cost. All right, we're moving on. So what are the health differences between natural building, green building, and conventional building? In most cases, naturally built walls breathe. It allows for moisture to move through the walls. This keeps the mold, the rot, and other problems from happening. So that's another benefit there. Excuse me. Green building and conventional building both require to have an airtight envelope. So this is basically what they're doing is they're trying to keep any air leakage or anything to come out or come in. And what ends up happening is that moisture can now be trapped. So in case there is a leak, somehow someone forgot something or caulking goes bad and moisture does get into the wall, well, that moisture can't go out and it can't go in because it's sealed on both sides of the wall. So then what ends up happening is it creates a perfect environment for mold or rot to start to duplicate. And then slowly over time, you'll start to see it penetrate through the drywall, through the plaster, through the siding, around your windows, around your tile, around the roof. And here are some pictures of people who have found mold after they enclosed their buildings with the airtight envelopes. And then let's see, moving on. Natural finishes like clay and lime are healing. They help reduce toxins from the air, and lime absorbs the carbon from the air as well. So lime is because as lime starts to harden, it actually takes the carbon outside that's floating around the air and putting it into its compounding to create limestone again. So manufactured materials, either green or not, they off-gas over the life of the product, causing long-term health problems to people living in the home. So again, it's important if you are going to build green or if you are using green products, just to look at the ingredients to make sure that it's not something that's going to be off-gassing throughout the process or throughout the life of the project. All right, in conclusion, let's finish up here. Your home is your temple. When you build with natural materials, your home feels like a part of nature. A healthy home means a healthy life for the people living in the home. Building only for what you need is affordable, sustainable, and is what nature does. Love what you do and do what you love. That includes your home. Natural building is not just a way of building, it's a way of life. And then natural building are works of art that you have the privilege to call home. So that concludes your class. And if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to post and we'll respond, or you can email us at info@naturallivingschool.com, and please visit our website also at naturallivingschool.com. See you next class.